Call to order, Town of Prescott Valley Study Session, June 5th, 2025. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lopez,
Here.
Councilmember Keo,
Present.
Councilmember Freund, Councilmember Greer,
Here.
Councilmember Schumacher,
Present.
Vice Mayor Searcher, not here, Mayor Palguda.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. First item up, CDBG Consolidated Plan and Annual Action Plan. Ms. Lyra, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. You may remember in April, we spoke to you about the Community Development Block Grant, referred to as CDBG, and the eligible spending opportunities. HUD has officially allocated us a little over $292,000 annually to the town through this grant. The town has contracted with TDA Consulting to complete our 5-year consolidated plan and first-year annual action plan, which is required to HUD. The draft is included in your packet and is currently open for public comment on our website. So here to discuss this is Jennifer Alpha from TDA Consulting.
Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, members of council. Thank you, Mayor, for having us tonight. We have been honored to work with the town of Prescott Valley on the development of your very first consolidated plan. TDA Consulting has been assisting communities across the country for over 25 years. I've been with the firm for about 14 years, and I do a lot of this planning work, and it's been really nice to work so closely with you all in this launching of this endeavor. So I just want to talk a little bit about the purpose of having hearings like this. So we want to share information about the consolidated planning process, and we also want to share with you the priority needs that we identified through our work and the goals that have been proposed in the draft consolidated plan for 2025 to 2029. And then, of course, we'd love to hear your feedback because we are still in that public comment period, like Tracy mentioned. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is a consolidated plan, describe the consolidated planning process a little bit, and then share with you HUD eligible activities and your current funding amount that has been allocated to you. It's important to understand the HUD eligible activities. A lot of people get excited about CDBG dollars, and you should, but they get really excited because they feel like, oh, these are really flexible funds and we can do a lot with them, and you absolutely can, but there are, of course, strings that come with federal dollars, so we have to make sure we're using them within the eligible uses. And then we will go over those proposed needs and goals for that are in that draft plan for public comment, and then what our next steps are going to look like. So as Tracy mentioned, the consolidated plan is a HUD required document. All recipients of CDBG funds, as well as some other of the HUD programs, have to complete a consolidated plan, and you can think of this like a strategic plan. So it will cover your use of funds that you get from HUD through the CDBG program for the next 5 years. To develop this plan, we have to identify the priority needs and then set goals, and then those goals guide your funding decisions each year that you receive an annual allocation. So for the 2025 allocation year, as Tracy mentioned, your proposed allocation from HUD is $292,411. And that plan is going to be implemented through what we call an annual action plan. So what you'll see in your packet with the plan that's available for public comment is that there is a 5-year consolidated plan and then a 1-year annual action plan. And every year in this 5-year plan cycle, you'll be doing a 1-year annual action plan. You think of the consolidated plan as more of a strategic document, the annual plan is more of an implementation document. Both of these plans, when you develop them, they have to go through a 30-day public comment period. So you'll be doing this annually, having this sort of process of developing these plans, putting them out for public comment, collecting feedback from the community. And that's the period that we're in right now. So the plan's been fully developed. It is out there for comment through the 18th. So anybody who's interested in providing written comment, anybody in the community can provide feedback to us through that comment process. The plans are available on the website, and they're also posted, I believe, here at the library and a few other places. So to come up with this plan, we do several things. One is that we analyze data, and this data looks at need in the housing market, in the community in general. We do that through collecting data through the ACS, the census, different data sources that are available to us at the national level, but focusing on the data coming right out of Prescott Valley. But we also look at some other data that we can find locally. So we talked with a lot of stakeholders, and the stakeholders provided us with feedback. Also, we know that there was another study that was going on for the housing study, and we used a lot of the data that was in that report as well. So we leveraged that information. But in addition to looking at that hard data, one of the things that we did a lot of was community consultation. And that's such an important process because that's what gives us the real flavor of what the needs are like. The numbers are interesting, but they don't really tell us about what's happening on the ground, particularly in real time. Data always has a bit of a lag, right? So the data that you'll see in the plan is the most current data is probably going to be around 2023 data. So talking to people individually is really important. So we did a series of interviews. There was an online survey that was done, and we used results from that. There were several community meetings that were held, and then we had official public hearings. HUD does require that you have official public hearings that have notice periods for the community. So we take all this data, we take all this community input, and we establish those priority needs, and then those flow into goals that, as I mentioned, will drive your funding decisions over the next 5 years. So before we get into the priority needs and the goals, let me tell you a little bit about CDBG. So the Community Development Block Grant Program has been around for decades. It is one of the most beloved programs that HUD offers to communities because, as I mentioned, you can do a lot of things with it. It benefits low and moderate income persons through services and community improvements, so things like infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, facilities, parks, playgrounds, community centers. You can also do economic development activities with it. You can also use it to aid in the prevention and elimination of blight, such as projects that are designed to provide neighborhood revitalization. And then if you were to have a natural disaster, you can use part of your funding to meet the needs of a natural disaster. That's called an urgent need activity. So these are all different things that you can do with CDBG dollars, but you can't, and we would advise you shouldn't try to do all of the things, particularly when you are starting out with a pretty small allocation like you have. So you want to look at what needs there are in the community and then say, okay, these are our needs. We could address any of these needs, right? But what is the best use of the CDBG dollars, particularly in relation to where we're at in learning how to use CDBG funds, right? So you don't want to jump all the way in the deep end right at first. Since there's so many things you can do with it, try to pick the things that fit best for your community and also for your administration. So the priority needs that we identified through our work, and remember that's the data and the community outreach, were addressing infrastructure concerns. So we heard from a lot of folks about the needs for sidewalk improvements, some needs around making sure there's water safety. So those all fall under the umbrella of infrastructure. People also wanted to create more inviting neighborhoods, so making neighborhoods more inviting for businesses to come in, for people to live in them, just sort of improving the general condition of neighborhoods. And then finally, addressing affordable housing concerns. And this was honestly the first concern that everybody had was affordable housing, followed quickly by the infrastructure concerns. The trouble with that is that CDBG doesn't give you a lot of options for doing housing. You can do a few different housing activities, but you can't use it for new affordable rental construction, as an example. So there are some limits around what you can do with CDBG dollars when it comes to housing activities. But it is a main concern, so we definitely added it as one of those priority needs that need to be addressed. And I know you've heard a lot about housing and concerns through the other study that was conducted. So what we did was we took those priority needs and we translated them into goals. The goals, as I mentioned, that's going to drive your funding decisions over the next 5 years. This plan runs 2025 through 2029. You do not have to address every goal every year. You can make choices. And with a small allocation like $292,000, it's kind of a good idea to take that strategy. So maybe in one year, you're going to look at infrastructure, and another year, maybe you're going to focus on a little housing and some infrastructure. But you don't need to divide that less than $300,000 across all of your goals every year. But the plan as it's laid out, it asks us in the overall plan to figure out how much are we going to spend on each goal over this 5-year period. And then in the annual plan, which goals are we going to address in this annual year, okay? So for the 5-year plan, the goals are here. So invest in public infrastructure and neighborhood revitalization, provide emergency home repair. So this is getting to the affordability aspect. And the reason that gets to the affordability aspect is because it helps people stay in their homes. And we know that once people become housing unstable or become homeless, it is so much harder to become rehoused and to gain that stability back. So keeping people in their homes in a safe environment is really a pillar of affordable housing strategy, because we don't want more people ending up homeless because it's so much harder to get them rehoused. It's so much more expensive to get them rehoused. So providing emergency home repair really does address that need of affordable housing concerns. And then finally, supporting low and moderate income businesses. So again, the businesses have to be low to moderate income. And this can be a range of different activities when you're supporting businesses, things like even facade repairs to businesses to make the businesses look more inviting and invite more customers and things like that. So you can see here from this chart that the idea for the 5-year plan is to focus on just the infrastructure goal in the first year. So that begins in the 2025 planning year. Then give that another year to just focus on infrastructure, kind of get your sea legs with the CDBG program and all the different rules and regulations that come along with it. And then in 2027, start introducing the home repair program. That requires a lot more policies and procedures, applications have to be developed, income verifications have to be done of people who apply. So it's a lot more administratively heavy. And it's a good idea to sort of take your time in setting up your policies and procedures so you do it right the first time. So the proposal is to start that in 2027, and then in 2028, ease into the supporting low and moderate income businesses. And so you'll see the allocation amounts there kind of divided up based on the amounts that you're likely to spend over these 5-year periods towards each of those goals. Now, just to kind of, as a reminder, and we're going to talk more about this in a minute, but for this entire program, we're trying to serve low and moderate income individuals and low and moderate income areas. So anytime you're doing things like infrastructure or facilities improvements, neighborhood revitalization, those things have to be done in low and moderate income areas. And then if you're doing direct assistance like the emergency home repair, that would need to be given to low and moderate income households. Okay. So that brings us to this slide, which is where we show you where those low and moderate income areas are in your community. So for area benefit activities, that's what they're called in HUD language. Area benefit is areas where the, let me go back. So for area benefit activities like infrastructure, which is that first goal that's going to start in the 2025 program year under the proposed plan, CDBG funds must be spent in areas where 51% or more of the households are low to moderate income. In HUD language, low to moderate income is a household that is earning less than 80% of the area median income. So if you look at these maps here, these dark purple areas are areas where 51% or more of households in that area are earning less than 80% AMI. So those dark purple areas are the areas where you're going to be able to spend your dollars for CDBG funds. Now, what's been very interesting and kind of fun to figure out here in Prescott Valley is that there's obviously a lot of areas that haven't been fully developed. And so when you look at this map, it's kind of like, oh, wow, there's lots of areas that we can work in, but not all of those areas have a lot of development in them. And so we use this map from City Detect, which was the other consultant that's been working with you on identifying, areas where there's blight and things like that. And City Detect provided us with this map on the right side, and those green areas are the places where there are developed parcels or parcels under development. So you can kind of see when you look at them side by side where there is going to be activity across those purple areas and where there's not going to be activity. And the other thing I want to point out about the map with the purple is that these maps are developed based on census tracts and block groups. And those don't care about town boundaries, right? So your census tracts and block groups, they're going to like bleed over the town boundaries. And that's why you see that purple sort of bleeding out from the town boundaries and sort of cutting across. And so we obviously know that some of this purple is not even part of Prescott Valley, but that's because those census tracts and block groups are spanning across the boundaries. What we did in your packet, and I didn't put the slides in this presentation, but in your packet, we take this map that's purple and we zoom in on it so that you can better see the street boundaries for the different areas that are highlighted in purple. And that'll give you a better understanding of where you can invest these funds. And you know your town well, so you'll know if like, okay, this particular street, there's a lot happening there. This street, that's not even developed. There's not even a street. Right? Things like that. So hopefully those maps will give you a little more insight into where CDBG dollars can be spent for area benefit activities like infrastructure. So if if you want to use the funds to do sidewalk improvements, you'll want to do those sidewalk improvements in the areas that are in purple. Okay? All right. So what happens next? So the plan's out for comment. As I mentioned, there's a lot of data in the plan. There's a lot of information about the consultation that we did. The bulk of the plan, though, the heart of the plan are those priority needs and the goals. And so we're looking for feedback from the community on whether the community feels like those are the right goals so that we can consider that as we wrap up the plan. The public comment period ends on the 18th. And then from there, we look at the comments that are received, we make any revisions to the plan, and then our goal is to submit the plan to HUD by June 30th. The deadline for submitting the plan is 60 days after they announce the allocations. That's the preferred deadline. So that would really bring us to the middle of July. So we'd be a little bit ahead of when it's actually due by submitting it by June 30th. But the statutory deadline is August 16th. So even if you miss that July 14th deadline, you actually still have like another month, but the absolute final deadline is August 16th. But we're gonna shoot for that June 30th date. Yeah, so any questions?
I have a few questions. The first one, I just want to ask, when you do the community, like the surveys and stuff, how do you track the demographics and where those residents live? Do you keep that data?
So TDA did not run the survey. The other consulting firm ran the survey. And I am not sure how they did their demographics. Typically what we do when we run a survey, and we can get that answer for you by looking at the survey instrument, but typically what we'll do when we run a survey is we'll ask for somebody's, depending on where we are and what's going to give us the best information, we might ask for the zip code or we might ask for the neighborhood. It just kind of depends on what the geography is like in the place we're working. So we would typically ask for that to figure out geographically where the responses are coming from. And we will also ask for lots of demographic information, race, ethnicity, language spoken at home, sex,
Sure.
yeah, all that stuff, yeah.
Just because the big concern is there's a lot of people that live in the purple area who could care less about a survey, right? They're too busy going to work. They're too busy raising their family that they're going to be like,
Right.
we don't care about that.
Yeah,
And with the flip side of that, someone that's living in Granville, who wishes to take a survey, they're not going to recognize the challenges of, say, a single mom that's trying to take a stroller down Florentine Road, realizing that there's not sidewalks that go across the whole length of Florentine. So
Yes.
that's a little bit of a concern with that. that's
Yeah,
all.
and you really hit the nail on the head. That is a concern everywhere we work. It is often difficult to get the people who will actually benefit from these services to respond to the surveys. But there was a really good survey response on this one, and so I think the likelihood that you did better than most in reaching folks is probably pretty high, but we can definitely look at the survey instrument and provide you some feedback on that. And then there were several community meetings that were held that, were pretty well attended. So hopefully that also got some folks out. And there were conversations with stakeholders that serve more vulnerable populations as well. So to the extent we can't reach people individually, we do talk to the folks who are serving those populations and advocating for those populations.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman, I believe did you have a question? No? Okay. Councilman?
Thank you so much for your great presentation, too. I appreciate that. On the natural disasters part of it, does the natural disaster have to occur within the time period of the money being allocated?
Yes, yeah.
Like we can't, if we had flooding 2 years ago and we still need to do some repair, we can identify that it needs to be repaired, but it hasn't happened in that time period. Does that matter?
Well, you can still use, so if the damage was to like infrastructure or something like that, you can use the fund to repair infrastructure as long as it's in the low mod areas. What urgent need does is it allows you to go outside of low mod areas to address concerns. And you can only use 30% of your grant for that. So 70% of your funds have to be used for low mod activities. But with respect, say you had non-low mod areas that had disaster damage 2 years ago, I don't think that you could use it for that.
Okay.
I'll get you a firm answer on that, but I'm pretty sure that would not be allowable.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilwoman?
What sorts of repairs are allowed?
Yeah, so under the infrastructure goal, you're asking about the infrastructure goal. So you can do sidewalks, streets, lighting. People will use it sometimes to put up like bus shelters. You can use it for sewer, water. I think about the bones of the community. That's typically where those funds can be spent. And CDBG has a whole matrix code of eligible activities. So we can also get that for you so you can see them a little more closely, like what are the eligible activities under CDBG. We can share that with you. Yeah.
I know in the past, this council's been very focused on just creating safe travels for pedestrians, either on bikes or on cars or walking.
Yeah.
And I know the town's also been very successful in adding sidewalks in those areas, where they're connecting schools, actually mainly connecting schools, which has been terrific in these areas. And I think if staff can just focus more on exactly where those gaps are in our current sidewalk situation, then we can work on actually having a continuous flow from
Yes.
east side of town to west side of town. I think that would
Yeah.
be good, at least to be able to see what that looks like and then have council revisit that. I think that would be a good direction.
Yeah, and Tracy and I have actually talked a good bit about, we're going to sit down next week actually and start to think about like what, how do these purple areas connect with the other areas in town and where might be kind of the sweet spots for spending the CDBG dollars, so that you are leveraging those past improvements with the ones that you might be able to make in those purple areas.
Just because I know we were so close to getting a clear run on Florentine for sidewalks. We just have a little gap between Robert Road and probably Yavapai where we can maybe add a little bit more connectivity. I think it would be great. So,
Yeah.
else, council? Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Next up, item 2B, license plate reader presentation. Sir, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all and staff about the wonderful public safety camera program that we've instituted. I'll start off by thanking the council for supporting those efforts. Y'all have accepted several grants that we received as a police department that have helped to fund just about everything that we've done so far. Staff has been supportive as well. And I want to also thank the members of our team at the police department that have been instrumental in writing for grants and taking care of the reporting and things, because there's a heavy lift there. So Isabel Sprague, Kim Martin, Nancy Roberts, Mike Corcoran have been instrumental in a lot of this. Thanks to them. I like to start the presentations off with why, but before I get to that, I just want to kind of talk about the history of policing when it comes to things like be on the lookout alerts and attempt to locate. So going back, before license plate readers were a thing, we get calls from the community about people driving in a reckless manner quite frequently, 2, 3, 4 a day, I would say. And we get calls from the community about other things. Well, lo and behold, how do people that drive recklessly, get along? They're in a car. How do criminals get from a crime scene to their home or to the crime scene in a car? So some of those be on the lookouts or BOLOs were also information that we would have as a police department saying this vehicle is likely involved in burglaries because this subject whom we are investigating looks to be committing burglaries. So pre-LPRs, officers would sit on the side of the road and watch for the vehicle to drive by. So let's just say, for example, we've got an attempt to locate on Highway 69 for a reckless driver. And we have maybe just 5 officers on duty at that time. 4 of them are tied up on a call. Now there's 1 officer that's racing up to Highway 69 to hopefully either intercept the vehicle or get ahead of it to make a traffic stop. It wasn't very effective, frankly. It took a little while to get from point A to point B. So the other big, and I'll use the term force multiplier that this system provides, is when now we have the vehicle that we are looking for that we think is involved in committing crimes like burglaries, as the example, the officer would have to sit and hope that that individual was going to leave their home and maybe drive to the store to make a stop on them, try to find evidence to further the case. So again, a lot of time used, but very little effectiveness. It was not often super effective to do things that way. So now, fast forward to license plate readers. Now we have a system, currently I think we have 26 active cameras in town, that as soon as a car drives by the license plate reader camera, it takes a photo of the rear of the vehicle and then immediately runs that through the computer, and there's almost instantaneous notification to our staff on patrol, in traffic. I get notifications on my phone. Dispatch gets the same notifications that, hey, a vehicle just passed this license plate reader and the system says that it is wanted for maybe it's one of our frequent drivers that drives aggressively. We do monitor those, and if there's somebody who's routinely reported as an aggressive driver, we will use the system to keep an eye. Primarily, what we're looking at as well are investigative hits, like I talked about the burglary. Now, if we have a detective, and the detective has identified an individual who's likely committing burglaries, he can put the license plate in the system, and then the same thing will happen. If it drives past a camera, we'll get a notification. So now a detective can have a record of where this vehicle has been in town and then potentially relate that vehicle to the scene of a burglary, thus enhancing the investigation. Versus in the past, we were relying on a set of eyes in a police car to do that. So it greatly enhances the safety of our community through being able to detect and then at times immediately apprehend these individuals who are committing things like road rage, aggressive driving, and also serious crimes. So public safety, I think the examples that I just described are a pretty good way to explain how public safety is affected. Traffic right now is very deep into using the system because they hunt down people that drive aggressively on our roadways. Our public is great about calling us when we have aggressive drivers on the roadway. Frequently, these individuals are called in multiple times before we're finally able to identify them and apprehend them. But the traffic team is now able, through the pictures that this license plate reader camera is taking of vehicles as they pass, they're able to do a search. So let's say there's somebody who's been reported 3 or 4 times driving recklessly on 89A in a blue pickup. They can go in the system and they can enter blue pickup and a time frame, and it'll show them every photo of a blue pickup that drove past that camera in that time frame. So now they can identify these aggressive drivers and be proactive about enforcing against them. And even some prevention work can be done to where we just, go to a house and knock on a door and say, listen, your vehicle has been reported as aggressively driving routinely at this time of the day. We would appreciate it if that's you, if you would cut it out. And then on the other hand, at times, we know now when they're driving exactly and where they're driving, and then we can wait for them in a more targeted fashion. The public safety, again, going back to the burglary example, now we can apprehend the burglar potentially when the suspect is on their way to a crime scene or from. So if that alert is set up and the officers on the street know that the detective wants that vehicle stopped, it'll be right in the alert, stop this vehicle because it's likely that this vehicle is going to or leaving a crime scene. They'll stop the vehicle, find a reason, and then potentially find the subject. In this case, a burglar might be in possession of stolen property or tools to commit burglaries. So public safety, officer safety. So, in the past when we made traffic stops, and still today many times, the first thing that we knew, or the first time that we knew about what the license plate related to in the form of potential crime involvement was after we had already stopped them. So now, because these license plate readers are reading these plates as they drive past, a lot of our officers are aware before they're stopping these vehicles if they are connected to crime or other criminal activity. I just talked about criminal investigations. So crash investigations can be aided when crashes happen to occur at locations where these cameras are located, because they can be used to track the movements of the vehicles before the collision, if that makes sense. So I'll give a few examples. This is just a quick list of the type of incidents that we have intervened in using the Flock system. I think I've got a little description of each one of them here. So in one case, we had 2 vehicles that were reportedly involved in a shooting. So one of the vehicles was occupied and shot at somebody in the other vehicle. So between Flock cameras that captured a vehicle at about that time that matched the description, the next day we were able to identify that suspect and take action. So the next example, this was actually in the first week that we had the system. I heard this one come out. Dispatch got the alert from Flock that a vehicle that had been flagged by the Pinal County Sheriff's Office because the driver was wanted for homicide, I think it was manslaughter, because she had killed an individual in a crash in their jurisdiction, but had fled since she had been sentenced. So she had a warrant for her arrest for homicide, essentially. So we stopped her and found in the back seat of her car her 12-year-old daughter, and the driver was impaired. So we stopped her, we put her in jail on DUI, multiple felony charges, including child endangerment, as well as the warrant that she had. And in my opinion, potentially prevented another crash in that case because she was pretty impaired. We had a case down on 69, near 169. It was a domestic type case. A couple of victims were shoved out of a moving vehicle, and we were able to identify the vehicle, again, through the use of Flock's photos that it had taken of the vehicle as it passed the cameras. This one was in the paper. If you all remember the French Bulldog story, we had a gentleman who had a bulldog jump out of his car at Roberts Market, and through the use, again, of a combination of a surveillance camera and a license plate reader, we were able to identify the individual who, in the end, actually was trying to do the right thing, it seemed at first, and the dog was wandering around the parking lot, so he grabbed the dog and drove away. So we were able to identify the car, go to the house, and get the dog back for the owner. So this one was a couple, 3 months ago now. We had a stolen vehicle report from an employee at a fitness center, and using Flock, immediately we were able to locate the vehicle, and I want to say it was the sheriff's office and DPS that made the traffic stop and arrested the suspect. So within moments of this victim's vehicle being stolen, we entered the vehicle into the system, we found it, and the sheriff's office and DPS were able to stop it. So let me just skip ahead. This is a really good one. So in this case, I can say pretty certainly that we prevented potentially a homicide all the way up to a mass shooting. So there's an individual in our jurisdiction who's reported as having made threats towards a doctor and making threats to go to the office and kill the doctor. Our officers use Flock, make a stop on the vehicle. He's got a firearm, it's loaded. So he was definitely intent, it seemed, upon doing that, and Flock allowed us to apprehend him before he got to the scene. Without Flock, we would have had to go to the doctor's office, get the doctor out, create a security plan at the doctor's office to stop the guy there if he got there. So just the prevention of violence, but also much less use of resources at times, frankly. This is a good one. So we had a gentleman with dementia who went missing. We entered his vehicle into the Flock system, and he's located the next day, given medical attention and taken to a hospital for care. So lots of usefulness with this system in helping to find people who wander, or are lost, or in need of medical treatment. So there's another burglary example there. So lots of success stories, and that's just a few. So I mentioned it before, we've got 26 license plate readers currently installed. We have 6 live view cameras at Mountain Valley Park. So the combination of the license plate reader and the live view camera greatly enhances the system in that the license plate reader just detects the license plate and takes a photo of the back of the car. The live view camera now keeps 30 days worth of footage of that area that's being viewed. So at Mountain Valley Park, we have several parking lots now that are going to be very well covered by public safety cameras, so that if the vehicle enters the park that is a crime vehicle or some other vehicle that we're looking for, we're going to know right away and we're going to get to the park. And then in addition to that, we're going to have cameras that we can use for current live view. If we know that something's going on at the park, our officers can be in their car if they choose to do this based upon their, what else they have to do at that moment. And they can pull up these cameras and see what's going on within the camera's view. Now, 2 additional cameras are going to go at the park soon, and these are pan-tilt zoom cameras. So the zoom capability, I want to say on these, is 30 times. And you can read a license plate at 1,500 feet. You can make out a tattoo on a person at 1,500 feet. They're incredible. And so what these 2 pan-tilt zoom cameras are going to do is, in combination with the whole system at the park, they're going to, through artificial intelligence and other things that I can't really speak to, they're going to work together. So as an example, we could set up an alert within the system to where the pan-tilt zoom camera between the hours of, Parks and Rec would probably want 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. because that's when the parks are closed. If somebody's wandering through the park, it will detect them, zoom in on them, and then throw an alert. Obviously, these are ongoing discussions about how many of these alerts we're going to set, because there's a lot of capabilities. You can set it to alert you when there's crowds of people and tell it, hey, if you see in this particular area a crowd of 5 or more people, please send us an alert. That would be very useful for the skate park, for example. So there's a lot of artificial intelligence alerting capabilities that these cameras are going to provide to us. And again, back to the recording, they maintain that footage for investigation purposes for 30 days. Another pretty phenomenal feature on these pan-tilt zoom cameras in particular is, let's say a car drives into the park that's got an alert on it because we're looking for that individual for, gang activity. And it will get the alert, and the camera will turn and look at the car and follow it all the way through the parking lot to where it goes, through the parking lot, as far as it can see. And so you can imagine the investigative potentials there. Lots of good things here for Crime Fight. The real-time operations platform, that's something that we haven't onboarded yet. We do have funding for it. What the real-time operations platform will do is take all of these cameras that we have, license plate readers, some cameras that we've already ingested from our Verkada system so that they can feed into this system. And in one place, for example, let's say an officer working light duty or whatever we can do to staff this capability until we can stand up the full capability of the real-time operations center, can hit a button on the map and it will immediately show the officer every camera within a quarter mile of the location that he's touched. So let's say there's a problem here out in the grass at Town Hall. Every Verkada camera that the town has now been ingested to the system. So with one touch of a button, the officer can see the view of any cameras that are that are nearby. So there's a lot more capabilities that that operations platform are going to provide to us. In the future, we'll be talking about drones as first responders and some pretty amazing things that platform is going to enable. Community partnerships. So we've been very vocal with this program. We've had at least one meeting in this room where we invited businesses. Our community services team has done outreach to our business community so that they're aware that, you know, we have these things. This is why we have them. This is what we're doing with them. But also so that businesses in the community, if they choose to do so, can plug a server of some kind into their private security. The server is walled off from their stuff, so there's no exchange of information there. And we can actually ingest cameras from businesses if they choose to do that. So a good example is Scottsdale has a very robust program, and I want to say their mall is providing them with every camera they have. You know, they had a pretty significant incident during COVID at the mall down there, so that's a big deal for them. So eventually, I think we'll get to the point where trusted business partners are going to start sharing with us. If we had a camera at Circle K, that would be wonderful, of course, in the unfortunate event that they were burglarized, robbed, or some other crime was being committed there. We've sat down with our HOA community. Homeco is basically, my understanding, the parent of every HOA in Prescott Valley except for Granville. So we talked to all of them at once, and they can themselves go in and purchase license plate readers and live view cameras to complement our system. And depending upon how they want to work it, they can just buy it and pay for it every year, and then we utilize it for crime fighting and traffic safety. So pretty cool program there. I hope that picks up soon. So I talked about a couple of these already. Staff engagement. So, you know, anytime you onboard new technology, and I'm the same way, really, I have to learn I got to have another password, another sign on. Like, how many different screens do I have to have? Will it work on my phone? Does it work on an iPhone? All the stuff that you go through, right? You know, and we expect that because we're human beings and we all do that. But right now, the staff engagement that we have with the system is just phenomenal. I'm super proud of our professional and sworn staff and the way that they're using it. Our investigators, our drug detectives, everybody has really 100% engaged with this software to make our community safer. So they are doing great. Regionalization. So we are already in conversation and have been for quite a while with the City of Prescott, the Sheriff's Office, about standing up some regional capabilities where there's some shared responsibility. You know, criminals don't mind boundaries of cities. That's well known. And so if we can share all of this infrastructure to work together, and we're already doing that. For example, we share all of our cameras with the City of Prescott and they share theirs with us. So our officers can, without having to ask for permission, can look at cameras outside of our jurisdiction, because many times the car will disappear from Prescott Valley on 69, but then there's a camera that the City of Prescott has on 69 and we can pick them up again in there. So lots of regionalized cooperation around this. Lots of good examples of that around the state. Scottsdale's got a strong program, and they're one of the leaders in the valley in the real-time operations center arena. They do a quarterly call. We're on that with them. The City of Prescott is. So we're really looking forward to being forward-leaning in this area and continuing to look at what technology we can continue to bring on board to make our officers and our community safer. Through the system, we share our data with 267 other flock agencies throughout the country. And, you know, at first we asked some questions. Do we want to share with everyone? Well, yeah, because if we share with them, they share with us. And now if I've got a license plate that was here doing something and we had them in the system entered because we were looking at them for, I don't know, an aggravated assault, and they trip to somewhere in Rhode Island where we're sharing information with, we'll know that. And then we can ask the Rhode Island authorities to help us out with the case, but also help make their community safer, because now Rhode Island is going to know they've got this person in their town that's probably a criminal. So we've shared with a lot and we'll continue to do so. The precautions and safeguards that we've enacted to, you know, protect this system, to ensure that that it's not misused, and if it is misused, there are serious consequences, are quite a few. So data retention and protection. Right now, everything that we get is encrypted, goes up to the Amazon cloud, and anytime it's pulled back down, it gets encrypted in the process as it comes back down to us so that we can use it. So good data protection there. Retention for everything is 30 days. After 30 days, it just falls out of the system. That's at times a challenge when it comes to certain investigations. Mayor, you know, sometimes you don't know about things until 30 days later, but we don't want to have so much data that we start to have other concerns on the other end about over surveillance and over retention of that kind of data. We have a strong policy that we worked with our legal advisors, our legal department, thank you, Ivan, as well as Lexipol, thank you, to institute, talks about training, talks about the things that we have to do, again, to keep that system safe. And then good training, we have Casey Graber, who has been phenomenal in being an admin with the system. She's provided training to our people. The Flock Safety Organization that is our vendor has been phenomenal at coming to our location to provide training, not just once, but several times, because as you can imagine, technology evolves pretty quickly, so we need to keep our officers trained. Funding. Right now, we have about $152,000 a year responsibility for this program overall. We haven't paid all of those bills yet, and we won't pay some of them. Flock might not like me very much for that, but we're really holding our feet to the fire when it comes to paying when the system is working properly. So it's working fine. It's just taken a little longer to install some of it than we would have liked. But my point is that out of that 152,000, so far only 15 has been town fund. The rest of it has been obtained from things like the DPS border grant and other grants that we have been awarded. There are future grant opportunities. It's unfortunate, though, that most grants aren't structured to maintain old systems that are already in place. They're structured to provide new systems. So we can continue to get money to add cameras, to add capabilities from grants, but we cannot fund the ongoing annual cost of the system with grants. It's not a possibility. Legislative funding, however, is a possibility, so we'll keep working on that end. And then obviously the reality is that some or all of the program at some point may need to be covered by the general fund. So does it work? And this is not scientific. You know, I didn't get this peer reviewed or anything like that. But in the 6 months before we had the system, we had 715 arrests, pardon me. And then in the 6 months after, we had 833, which is a 17% increase. That's significant. That's a big increase in 6 months. Again, I can't tell you standing in front of you here today that has anything or everything to do with our license plate system or public safety cameras, but I wholeheartedly believe it does. And I think there's a lot of evidence, especially in those examples that I gave of cases where we probably wouldn't have made arrests, that we are now capable of making those arrests. A little quote from Chief Ticer: by integrating this technology into our policing model, our officers have seen significant successes in capturing dangerous suspects quickly, which in turn keeps our community safer. I don't think I have anything else. We do have, speaking of transparency, we do have a link on our website that the public can go to that very clearly says what do we have? What do we have this many license plates, we have this many live view cameras. So we're being open about that information. We're not trying to hide it. We're out here talking to you all about that. And as a result, the public knows what we're doing. Sorry.
Councilman?
And I do have, if I may real quick, I do have a representative from Flock here as well, in case you have questions that I can't answer.
Yeah, I have two short questions. One is, with the live feed cameras, it would seem that the next step would be facial recognition software. And is there any move afoot to implement that?
So I can answer that question by saying there is talk of it. It's not a capability of the system yet. So I don't want to get into the specifics of what they are talking about doing, because that may not become a reality, but it is a conversation. We do have a facial recognition policy that we're working with. Legal's seen it. We've bounced it off of a few other people. And what I can say, Councilman, is that if we do allow that capability within the system, it'll be very well guided by policy and training.
And then the other one is, as far as the 17% change in the statistics there on the arrests, would be, is there any way that you could start separating it out to show, since you already have a lot of statistics, maybe have a box to check or something where if Flock was involved, that you'd give credit to that. If it wasn't, it wouldn't. So you could figure out more closely what the statistics were, the actual statistics were on the effectiveness.
Yes, I'll look into how we can figure the statistical piece out, Councilman. And we do have a box already, so our officers check the box. What they're doing right now, they check it whenever they use it, because right now we want to know when we're using it. So I'll consider what you've asked. Maybe there's a way to tweak what we're doing to accomplish that. Thank you.
Councilwoman?
Assistant Chief Edelstein, that was a great presentation as well. Thank you. On the 30-day retention, we can still save the, let's say you do need that information, you can still save it at that time though, right? It doesn't just, like Mission Impossible, disintegrate at 30 days, correct?
Yes, is the short answer. So what generally happens, let's say in the example of we have a detective working a burglary case and there's a vehicle that detective's working, that information will immediately move from the Flock system into our evidence.com system, where it would be retained based upon the retention for the case.
Thank you. Okay, great. And then what are the size of the cameras about?
I want to say so they're solar, the panel I think is about this big. Yeah, and the camera I think is only about like that tall.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on the live cameras, are they motion activated too, so that it automatically follows the movement? Can a person actually come back and like turn it to where they may want it? Happen to be monitoring the system?
So, yes, council member, I think the question you asked was, first of all, is it motion activated? Yes. And those are settings that we can create. We could say, no, we don't want motion activation. We only want people activation if it sees a person. So we can kind of tell the camera how we want it to behave. And then as far as, yes, you can manually from, a computer or your phone, move the camera yourself if you want to look at something in particular. Yeah.
And is there a big cost difference between the live cameras versus the fixed ones? Would it be more beneficial to our community to have more of the live cameras than fixed cameras, like for in the future, if we're going to add to the system? And then the second part of that question is, do we have enough? Because I know we have a huge area that you're trying to follow on everything.
No, we want more.
I know you want more. We're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, so using a lot of different information, including traffic flow from SIMPO, and then crime data and traffic crash data. We put that all into artificial intelligence and used some other tools to designate what would like a full-blown system look like. So we do have a plan. I think you've seen it. Yeah. It's about maybe $250,000 a year is what we need just for cameras. And that includes fixed live view cameras, as well as the pan tilt zoom cameras and some more license plate readers. We think that's about fully built out as far as that capacity is concerned.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Chief, who decides which vehicles or which license plates get entered into the system?
Thank you. Great question. So it's an individual officer's decision. We train them on the parameters. Some of our professional staff does have the ability to do so as well. And they make the decision to put it in the system. When they do that, though, there's a box they have to fill in. And usually they're putting a report number in there, because almost everything has a report number. Sometimes maybe if it's a preliminary investigation, they'll use a case number or a CAD incident number, something like that. But there's that check and balance.
Because you could see someone could say they went by a bar, entered every license plate parked at a bar, and wanting to know if those vehicles leave and hit the street, and kind of see the possibility of
Possibility of misuse is there, sir. And you reminded me as well, Mayor, thank you for saying vehicle. I don't know why I didn't think of this before. We have two, and these are kind of a test phase thing. We have two license plate reader capable dash cameras in traffic. And they love them. Not just because they're reading plates as they're driving around, which is a little bit different than our fixed license plate readers, but also because the cameras are capturing the behavior of the driver before the traffic stop, which, as you know, Mayor, is very important for court. So you
Gotcha.
have 2 of those.
You mentioned earlier in reference like an aggressive driver that's been repeatedly reported. Does that aggressive driver know that they're in the system? Will they be told that, hey, your license plate is getting entered and every time you're driving around, you're going to be tracked?
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
sure
good question.
on how that would work, right?
That's a
Like,
good
what-
question.
Where do you draw the line on that?
Yeah, good question. I'll follow up on that and get back to you.
That's all. Just, and then how that happens. Like, does my neighbor report me as an aggressive driver and the officer just goes off of the neighbor's report, puts me in the system, and now I'm being tracked around Prescott Valley and Prescott?
Generally speaking, and I'll verify all these things and get back to you through the town manager's office, the traffic team doesn't use it for those reasons until there's multiple complaints and they can't catch them themselves, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when they're elusive, or many times these aggressive drivers are just, they're running from our traffic team. They're running from our patrol officers, especially motorcycles. And so we're not pursuing because we don't run after those people, right? It's not
Awesome.
safe. So that's a lot of the times when the system's used for this purpose, but I'll get you more detail.
Perfect. And my final question is for the gentleman representing Flock. I figured you already came out here. You might as well at least go to the podium for a minute, right? So I'm sure you hear this a lot, or you've had this questioned, and I've seen it before too. Like, this is a great tool for our law enforcement officers, but it's that fine line, right, where you have those people that argue Big Brother is watching. What do you say, or what does your company say to those folks?
Yeah, no, look, I appreciate that question, Mayor, and Council, thank you for having me here as well. But the system, we try to draw as much parameters as we possibly can to make sure that there is an audit trail and make sure that there's not a misuse in the system. So for example, if we get a report for an erratic driver or like somebody that might be a drunk driver, right? And then we're entering into the system, all right, looking for a white Honda, and it's got maybe some other key identifiers like a windshield sticker. Then we're going to put that in the system, but it's not going to return any results unless you tie it to a case number or some sort of search reason. So without a search reason into the system, you're not going to be able to return any results. And then furthermore, I'll echo what Chief Edelstein said as well, is that we have a 30-day retention policy on this so that we're not just holding on to data and getting to the point where we're over-policing.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
That's all I have.
Can I add one thing? I
Absolutely.
just remembered. We are not, and these are not even capable of measuring the speed of vehicles, so they're not being used for photo enforcement. I think there was some social media comments out there, but at some point with a concern, so I just wanted to address that.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Moving on, item 2C, revisions, human resource policy. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present a general overview of our proposed amendments to the Human Resources Policy Manual. We do an annual review of our policy manual to ensure that we are compliant and consistent with our business practices as well as transparent across the organization. The guiding principles this year were influenced by several updates, but specifically the transition to our new HR and payroll software, which has automated several of our procedures and processes, and we want to make sure that our policy is aligned with that. The new amendments to this year's policy manual includes a glossary of terms to promote, again, consistency across the policies, as well as to clarify the town manager authority to establish procedures, which is how we carry out the policies that are described in the manual. We've also determined and clarified the temporary directive process that allows the town manager to implement a time-limited temporary directive superseding a policy in the event that we need to make an emergency amendment until such time we can bring it in front of council and adopt it formally into our policy manual. Both of those changes are aligned with our town codes, so no additional revisions will be needed there. Almost all of our policies this year have been modified in some way, so these are the substantial amendments, and we'll go over a general overview of the other amendments as well. But when we come forward on June 26th with the policy manual, it will be a clean version because it was such a substantial rewrite this year. Our overtime, it has been updated to clarify that it's on physical hours worked. We've modified our general leave with our new system to be prorated for part-time individuals based on that full-time personnel. We've modified our holiday to align with our our town's schedule, which is a 5/8 schedule. So our full-time employees will receive 8 hours for the holiday pay, and our sworn officers will remain at 10. We also aligned a lot of our leave policies, our holiday, and our practices with the fiscal year to ensure that it is consistent with the budget process, and we can review that every year. And then we've made modifications to the tuition reimbursement in the event that an employee leaves within the year to have a prorated repayment rather than trying to collect the full reimbursement when an individual has been with us. Other amendments, again, outlined up here, but we've covered the substantial amendments on the other slide. And then we do have a few policies that we are removing from the manual this year, including notably our informal HR action review. We previously in our town policies had one appeal process. It was broken into 3 different policies in 2023, but we found that that's been very difficult for employees as well as the organization. So we've consolidated that into a formal appeal process for any punitive disciplinary action. And then we've maintained our grievance policy, but we went ahead and removed that informal HR action. We've also removed any of our policies that were unbudgeted or unused. And with that, we will be back on June 26th with our full policy revision. Again, it will be the clean version, and I'll open it up for any questions.
Council, any questions? Ma'am, great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, final item, 2D, proposed amendment number 2, Stone Ridge Development Agreement. Mr. Legler.
Yes, Mayor and Council. Tom Lowe is here to really carry the discussion. He can come to the lectern and answer your questions and give you some background from a direct perspective. John Latier is here. He isn't making a presentation, but if you have any questions of him about the infrastructure that we've kind of reorganized for Stone Ridge as part of the proposed amendment to the development agreement, he can respond to that. I've been given the job of giving you the background, and you know how much I love history, and you know much how you may hate me going into rabbit holes, so I'll try to move this quickly. But I do love the history, especially when I start with the fact that the Stone Ridge development started 31 years ago. So it started in 1994 with annexation of 1,880 acres. And at the time, the concept was called Lynx Creek Ranch. And the council entered into a development agreement, and there was a development master plan. That master plan proposed 5,000 units at the time. The development agreement was going to end in 2009, so the thought was that in 15 years, 5,000 units would be built there. It didn't go that way, and that's really one of the reasons why we're here today with a proposed second amendment to that development agreement. In 1995, there was a first amendment to that development agreement that kind of clarified the infrastructure that was being proposed for those units, and the name was changed to Stone Ridge. But the folks that were proposing the development were still looking for partners. And so another 3 years passed before anything really happened. In 1998, Suncor Development Company, which was part of Pinnacle West, came forward and said they wanted to be part of the project. And the first thing they did was reduce the number of proposed units. They reduced it from 5,000 down to 3,000. It was a huge change. And they came forward and said, let's adopt a preliminary development plan that has the idea of 3,000 units instead of 5,000. And so they started moving ahead. There was a second amendment, and that second amendment to the development agreement solidified the number of units as 3,053 units in now 1,920 acres. They then came forward and said, let's take all of those amendments and synthesize this down to what we'll call a restated development agreement, and that occurred in 2000. And that's when the development actually started. So it took 6 years before we actually started. In fact, it was about 7 years before we started building houses there at Stone Ridge. During that period, 7 units were developed. In 2004, they came forward with, Suncor came forward with a proposed amendment to the zoning that would again reduce the units, this time down to 2,832 units. And that is the number that we have today. So 7 units were begun, and by 2005, there were 1,070 platted lots. But what happened in 2008? That was the Great Recession. And even Pinnacle West was impacted by the Great Recession. They tried to fix some things. They tried to bring on a partner. They tried to do a number of things. But by 2010, they informed the town that they were going to declare bankruptcy. And so the town got outside bankruptcy counsel. The HOA hired its own counsel. And we began working with that council to try to work through the bankruptcy as best we could for the benefit of the residents and for the town. One of the things they were concerned about was they wanted to make sure that the Stone Ridge Community Center would stay within their control. And so we went through a process where we worked it out that Pinnacle West would lease that building, in fact, would convey that building to the Stone Ridge Community Facilities Board. And then the board would turn around and lease that to the HOA. And so today, the HOA runs that under the lease. They make payments, lease payments, and those lease payments are used to help pay off the bonds that had been issued back in 2001, the initial $14 million bond issue. And so it was a good process. It worked out very well. About that time is when Tom Lowe came on the scene. He created a couple of entities called the Univest entities, and he indicated that he was willing to take over Suncor's obligations. And so in August of 2011, he worked with the Stone Ridge Board, and there was an agreement that he would take over Suncor's interest. And the development agreement at that time, this was the restated development agreement, was now amended so that it would end in 2030 instead of 2009. Yes, I'm getting yes. And so, yes, because that was in 2011. So there was that amendment, and we were excited about Tom and his entities taking over and the possibility that things were going to continue. The trouble was that the bankruptcy continued as well. And so in 2012, we all dealt with the Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was difficult. We didn't finally get a bankruptcy plan until 2013. That bankruptcy plan finally made a distribution to the Stone Ridge CFD of a little over $1 million. The deposit that Suncor had put in of about $3 million was able to be used now. And Mr. Lowe and his company actually donated $200,000 to the CFD to help us pay for our legal costs, and also just to make a contribution towards the bonds. And so on that basis, the CFD board was able to refinance the bonds. And in 2013, instead of the $14 million bond we'd had before, we went to about an $8.5 million bond. And we were able to move forward with the project. It was a great day because that meant that Stone Ridge was going to keep going forward. Today, we have 1,232 dwelling units that have been platted. That means that there are 1,600 under the agreement, under the zoning, under the plans that could still be platted. Now, notwithstanding all the changes that had occurred from 5,000 units down to 2,800, thank you, 832. We had never amended the development agreement to change the infrastructure that had to be developed. And so there were all kinds of roads, including a bridge, an extension of Navajo Drive that would eventually go across the Lynx Creek. And at a certain point, up to, I think it was about 2,800 units. They were going to have to build that as a 2-lane road, and it just didn't make sense. No one was going to ever do that because we were down to 2,832 units anyway. And so Mr. Lowe came to us and said, I'd like to change the development agreement. And this is what I propose to do. If you'll agree to extend it again to the year 2045, I'll agree to reduce the total units down now to 2,232. So instead of 1,600 still being available, there would only now be 1,000 left that could be platted. And if you'll allow me also to pay you an amount per house that gets built, you can then take that and you can build the improvements. Don't have me build them. I'll donate to you a certain amount of money, and you go out and you build those improvements as you need to going forward. And then he asked us also, then he indicated to us that he would take some steps to make sure that the golf course would still be available as open space. Something that the residents out there have been very anxious about, the desire for that to be kept going forward. Do you have any questions of me before Tom comes up?
No, sir.
Okay. Tom, you want to come up?
Welcome, Mr. Lowe.
Hello, everybody. My name's Tom Lowe. Our family owns the Stone Ridge project, as Ivan stated. And I'm here today just to answer any questions that you might have about the project and the new ideas that we have for the project. But I'd like to thank the town and the staff for all the work they put in figuring out the role for Stone Ridge going forward in the future, and not just focusing on the past, because things have changed quite a bit in the last 30 years. That new plan now includes, 1, less density, 2, rounding out of the housing types available in the community. We're going to focus on the higher end. 3, to structure a plan to build the necessary infrastructure within and outside of Stone Ridge and provide more flexibility for the town to use those resources where they see fit, not just in Stone Ridge. 4, to provide public access to the U.S. Forest Service for Prescott Valley residents. 5, to expand the trail system. And 6, for the continued operation of the golf course and use for community building events and activities. Like I said, this updated plan focuses on the values of the community today as opposed to 30 years ago. Our family thinks we figured out how to make these new goals work with the reduced density and whatnot, and are supportive of this plan that we've come up with. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll stay afterwards for anybody that's here that has questions for me as well. So I'll turn it over to you all. Any
Mr.
questions?
Lowe, I have a couple questions. When was the last time you've had phases open, where you've had a model home or a model office where people have gone in, picked a lot, built a house? When's the last time that's happened?
4 years.
That was 4 years ago?
Yes.
So with this new approach, you would open back up your model office and create phases? Is that how it would work?
We would start developing in phases. Yes. In fact, once we came to some agreements on what made sense for Stone Ridge in the community, we actually moved forward with our first subdivision. A few weeks ago, it came before the city council for approval.
Gotcha. And then what is your timeline on this? Opening it up, developing your area?
Literally, if you all approve this next week, I think we're already actually into the town for the platting of that next phase, and we would start just as soon as the contractors could start moving forward.
And you described possible options. So if the town was just to say, hey, you know what, we're going to hold your feet to the fire, here's where you're at. What happens with, like, how do you manage your golf course? How does that play into the role of a Stone Ridge subdivision?
and this has been what we've tried to figure out. How do you take the new priorities for the community? Water has become a huge issue. And so we have water for the entire allotment of homes that we have, but people were concerned about that, so we tried to address that. Plus, the community is moving towards a fully rounded community and provide all types of housing for attracting companies and whatnot. So we've, working on the higher end where we have larger lots and whatnot, allowed us to focus on that higher end and economically make it work to help subsidize the golf course. And we've got a plan for us internally to use that golf course as an amenity for the community and have the community, not any of the prior homeowners, this would be for future homeowners, to help pay for the continued operation of the golf course.
Gotcha. And geographically, you would head south? Is that where you would? Or is there certain areas you would?
There's 3 sections. The one section is pretty much fully built out, or will be with this next phase. The next section would move over to the back 9 of the golf course. And then finally, the 3rd section, up the 600 acres to the south, would be built out. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman?
I just have a couple of things I wanted to state as well. So the golf course and the restaurant, they are open to the public, correct?
They are. That's
Okay.
kind of an important thing to us. Yeah.
Community?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. And I just wanted to say too that there is a group in town that is actually really grateful to you for less density. So that's actually a good thing, I guess, too. And then I just wanted to say that the end product that you have achieved to date, I know that I'm hoping you feel a lot of satisfaction in that, because I know the people that live there are very grateful for what they have. And it is a gorgeous community. And I've heard that the golf course is very challenging. I don't golf, but it's one of the top topics when people are golfers. So thank you for what you've already provided. And I'm looking forward to what else you're going to complete out. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We do work hard at that and trying to stay up with the Prescott Valley community and what their goals and objectives are as the community matures, because it is dramatically different now than it was 30 years ago when this project was initially planned. And, even though it's, challenging to figure out how to work through a 40% reduction, or whatever the numbers are, in revenue on the project, and still be able to take care of those amenities has been challenging. But I mean, there were just some fabulous ideas through this whole project that just, or process that allowed this all to come together. So.
Thank you, sir. Is it Mr. Latier? He has a presentation? No? I just want to say, just think back 34 years ago, and then think about today. The fact that we were considering putting a bridge south of Navajo to connect Old Black Canyon Highway, that is bonkers to me that we thought that was a good idea. But so be it, here we are.
That really was what the approach, thank you, Mayor, Council. That really was the approach to this about a year ago when Tom came to the town with his proposal. One of the things that jumped off the page to me was the amount of homes and the related traffic volume that would generate. Parker, our traffic engineer, and I started looking at that right away, and we knew right away that what was being proposed would not require the amount of infrastructure that was in that original agreement. And we started working with the idea that what can we work with that's out there now, try to retrofit it into what that change was, and that's how we came up with the items that are in the development agreement now.
Thank you, sir. Anything for Mr. Latier? Mr. Lowe, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing that it's a little embarrassing that
It
John.
was your idea about a bridge.
Yeah, and John was like, "Hey, you need to rethink the infrastructure requirements. They may not necessarily be needed in Stone Ridge, so we can adjust accordingly." But it freed up this whole idea of being able to use the funds from Stone Ridge for areas outside of Stone Ridge, and that is really pretty exciting. So.
And with that being said, would there be, in your mind, a time schedule for the western portion of Old Black Canyon that is in town limits to be paid?
That is purely up to you all.
Town decision at that point?
That's a town decision. We've just placed our confidence in you all to know what infrastructure makes the most sense when. And we'll continue to work with you all in terms of that timing. And if, we were short a little bit to do a light, so we're going to do that up front and that type of thing.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilwoman?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that I heard you right, that you have had some meetings with the community of Stone Ridge, some of the residents?
We've talked to individuals. We haven't had community meetings, no.
Okay, okay.
No, there's been more interest in the activities that we were going to have there than anything else over at the golf club and the clubhouse there.
Okay, bringing the community
Doing
together.
yeah, we use that. We used to have holiday events and fundraising events. We do stuff for the police department, the fire department each year. Just those kind of activities that create a community center over there.
Thank you.
And Mr. Legler, you mentioned there was a trigger point with the original development agreement on when the bridge would have to be placed in. What was that number of homes?
Again, that would have been 2,800 is my memory.
So if he went to, Mr. Lowe, went to 2,799, he would not be required to do that.
Correct, and he's now down to 2,232, so we're taking that out of the agreement.
And that's what I'm saying. He could still tomorrow set his plots up to the trigger point with no council involvement at all. He could do whatever he wanted and not be required to do those infrastructure improvements.
Right, I'm sorry, what you're talking about is that there are no current infrastructure requirements until he gets to 1,400.
Gotcha.
And so right now, he's at 232, so he could have built 168 more with no additional.
No additional ones.
Right.
And then there'd be another level of improvements after that.
That's correct, yes.
It would almost be a tier system on the amount of
Right,
homes
under the current agreement.
under the current agreement.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Lucier?
If I could offer, just to clarify on the answer you asked about the west leg of paving Old Black Canyon. We did work, that was one condition that we put in the development agreement. We did work with Tom on the areas that he plans to continue to build and the phasing for those. And when those areas that would access directly to that leg of Old Black Canyon, that's when they would be required to pave that. But at the same time, the way the funding was set up, I think it's going to be set up to allow the town a little bit of flexibility to do that, maybe in advance of that.
Sooner than later, is that what you're saying? Excellent. Thank you. With that being said, no further questions from council. Thank you, gentlemen. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks for coming out, everyone.